Describe the benefit of spouse.
Louder.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. ونستعين ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور انفسنا ومن سيئات اعمالنا ما يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له اشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد ان محمدا عبده ورسوله.
I could just tell you this that
رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي امري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So last week we covered the birth, the early childhood of the Prophet ﷺ, and that was Brother Mehdi's session, I believe. Yeah. This week is going to be about the Prophet's early adulthood, so inshallah I'm going to try to keep it short. It's going to be about basically his teenage years, some things that happened in his teenage years, and then some things that happened in his early adulthood when it comes to his marriages and things like that, and of course his children, and then of course who he ended up adopting later on, inshallah. So Rasulullah, he said actually Allah did not send any prophet except he was a shepherd of sheep. And then, like, of course, this holds true when you look at all of the prophets. The same nice, he was a shepherd. Sorry, speak out of it. All of the prophets, they were all shepherds. All of them. Now, this exception also holds true for Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. Okay. I'll give. So when he said this hadith, companions told him, he said, "What about you? Oh, Ya Rasulullah, what about you?" Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam said, "Yes, I was a shepherd. I used to tend to the flock of the people in Mecca in return for some pennies." The wisdoms of mandating this profession, Islam, it's many. There's many wisdoms in making sure the prophets are shepherds. One thing is shepherds, something that they find themselves in, despite being surrounded by many sheep, is solitude. They have that kind of sense of solitude, that the Prophet ﷺ would have when he would go up to the cave. Once you have solitude, it gives you time and it gives you the attention and it gives you the domain, kind of think and reflect on the graces of Allah, think about meaning of life, all these things. So him being a shepherd gave him the opportunity to have these kinds of reflections. And of course, looking at Allah's creation, looking at the mountains, looking at the plains, looking at the sheep, all these things, this is very good when it comes to doing this reflection on Allah's creation. So being a shepherd gave him the opportunity to do that. So he indeed was another shepherd. He was not an exception of all these shepherds. He was also a prophet, and he was also a shepherd because he was a prophet. So, of course, he also mentioned in the hadith, he said Allah did not send any prophet except that he was a shepherd of sheep. He did not say shepherd, because you can be a shepherd of people. You can be a leader, maybe a world leader or something, and then you're kind of leading people. You can be considered a shepherd of people. But he said shepherd of sheep. So why sheep? Why is it not people? Why is it not bugs? Why is it not this or that? Why is it sheep? I think about sheep as we know that they are heedless. People follow something without thinking, without reflection. People say, "Oh, that's a sheep." They're just following us. They're not humans, right? So because of that, that is because they are very heedless. They don't think themselves that much. They just follow the whole crowd, follow the whole sheep population or group. And the thing is, another thing is, sheep, although they do have that kind of trait where they follow each other, they fall into one large group, they also can vary in personality. Some sheep can be different than others when it comes to, their tendencies, how they act. Some of them can be more soft, some can be maybe a little bit off the edge as outliers, Now, however, being a shepherd, it requires two different things. You have to be soft and tender, and you have to be what? You also have to be brave and courageous. Now, why do you have to be soft and tender as a shepherd? It's because you have your sheep. Sorry?
They're sheep.
Oh yeah, you have sheep. You have sheep, and you want them to be taken care of. You want them to listen to you, but you don't want to be aggressive with your own sheep. You want them to listen to you without them, falling apart, running away. But you also have to be brave and courageous. Now, why is this? Because you have to defend your sheep as well, right? If there are wolves coming against your sheep, you're not just going to let the wolves take your sheep and eat them for dinner and let that be. No. You want to be brave and very courageous against the wolves. The wolves will kill you. That's why it requires bravery and courage. Now, of course, being a shepherd, it also necessitates like humility and contentment. But it's a very hard job. Yet it's also kind of menial, just moving sheep. But it's very, very difficult, and it can't come without that much fulfillment. So, kind of instills, if you were to work as a shepherd, you'll kind of have that contentment still within you. So, the Prophet ﷺ, he was a shepherd, and he had that within him. He had this contentment, but he also had softness and tenderness, and he was brave and courageous. Okay, these are all very good qualities the Prophet had, as we already know, and we will continue to learn about, inshallah. So Now I'm going to talk about two little incidents that happened before prophethood, and then we're going to talk about what the Prophet ﷺ said about these incidents. So the Prophet ﷺ was about 15 years old. There were some small battles that happened between two large tribes. Okay? A tribe member from the branch of Kinana, to whom the Quraysh belonged, they killed a man from a branch of Hawazin. Now this branch, so basically there's two tribes. One member of this one tribe killed a member of another. The killer, where did he go to flee? He went to Al-Haram. Why do you think he went there? Just a guess. Yeah, it's a sacred place. You don't kill people. I mean, it's one of the like, very sacred, right? However, because they were very they were outraged. One person from the other tribe, they went in and they attacked the man in the Haram, in this very holy sacred place. And this is all before prophethood, by the way. They killed a man, or they attacked the man in the Haram. So what happened after that? Of course, Quraysh was not very happy with that. They were very angry because like the sanctity of the Haram was basically like violated. So they declared a war. So there's a giant war between these two giant tribes. And what did the Prophet ﷺ say about this? But this is all before he was a prophet. He was 15 years old or so. He said, at a later date, he said, I remember participating in the Fajr wars. I would collect and return arrows for my uncles. I do not regret participating in that war. So this is the first incident I wanted to mention that happened before the Prophet. Now I'll expand on it a bit more later, but let me get to the second incident. So a few years later, when the Prophet ﷺ was 20 years old, another incident occurred. Something else happened. A Yemeni man came to Mecca to do Hajj. Now, of course, Hajj can be very expensive. It's very expensive now, and it was very expensive back then for some people. So this man went to go sell some things to pay for this trip. So he went to this guy called Elias. This guy was like a chieftain. He was like a very influential politician. So he went to him to trade some things. Now this guy, he did not pay him back. He did not. He was kind of stalling paying him back. He did not. Just kept delaying it, not paying him back. And of course, this caused the man, the Yemeni guy, who wanted to do Hajj. He was in a situation where like, look, I'm owed this money to pay for my trip to do Hajj, and he's kind of avoiding. You know, he went all over the place. He tried talking to different politicians and stuff to see, can you guys take care of this issue for me? You guys stalling. He owes me money. He's not paying me. But this guy's very influential. He's a very influential politician. So of course, I mean, what happens? What do you think is going to happen? Like, you think they're going to try to make a conflict? They're trying to avoid conflict, right? If you're a cop and you pull over a senator or councilman or district attorney or something, and then you find out he has that position, you usually let him go. That's usually what happens in this country. It's not 100% right, but that's usually what happens in this country where that happens. But in this case, same thing, right? Politician, the other politicians will not help because they don't want to cause a problem with a fellow politician. You cause issues, they can cause inconvenience for them. It becomes difficult for them at the end. So, and of course, this guy was a coward. He was a lone traveler to Mecca, right? He was a Yemeni guy. He's by himself, and he was easy praying. He was just a traveler. And at that time, it was very easy to go pray upon these people who were travelers because they were not like important as citizens in terms of like status. However, this guy, he was not going to let that slide, right? So right now, if something happens, some kind of issue happens, you go on Instagram, or some people do this at least. You go on Instagram, they go on TikTok or whatever, and they talk about their problems. You say, oh, this guy did this to me, this person did this to me, and they post on TikTok or Instagram. It spreads awareness. At this time, there was no iPhone, there was no YouTube or whatever. So what did they do? He went to the Kaaba. He went there, and as a form of media, what they would do is they would talk. They would do like a poem describing the incident. So he went to the Kaaba and he had the poem. He talked about it. And he said, he basically had a poem that he recited about this issue that happened, and it became very like it had a very good reception. It was very well received until Zubair ibn Abdul Talib, which is the Prophet's uncle, he heard about it. But once he heard about it, he had a meeting with the senior tribesmen of Quraysh about this issue. And at the end of the day, came to a treaty, or what happens? Came to a treaty where people are treated fairly. So, just to be more specific, a treaty was formed where the Quraysh vowed to support the oppressed over the oppressor, regardless of the tribal standing of either party. So, regardless of somebody's from a certain tribe, or somebody's traveling, or someone's from here or there, they will be treated equally and fairly. Even if the oppressor is from Quraysh, fair treatment, you're going to punish him normally. And it's about who is right, who is wrong, who's oppressed, who is the oppressor. So this was made, of course, alhamdulillah. It was called the Khilaf al-Flud, which is, they called it that because Elias, the guy who basically was dodging paying the money. He said that this pact was like hududi, which is like none of their business. He said this pact was none of their business to make this pact and treaty. But no, they call it, yes, it is. It's everybody's business because matters of oppression are societal concern. So this concerns everybody. So this is a treaty that concerns everyone. So it's everybody's business. Thus we will call it hil el hudud, hil business. Okay, or that's not exactly what it means, but it is everybody's business. Okay. So this is an unprecedented attack. This is something that came out of nowhere. Nobody expected it to happen. It was a very, very momentous thing to happen, especially in terms of justice. And the Prophet ﷺ said, I witnessed this. I witnessed in the house of Abdullah ibn Judan a treaty that where I asked to uphold its Islam, even in Islam, I would do so, and I would not give up my place, even if offered a large amount of money. So this shows that he strongly supported this legislation that came out. He supported it, even though it was before his time. It had nothing to do with Islam. This was just about right or wrong, oppressed, oppressor, all this. He still supported the legislation. And of course, this comes. I don't want to get into it too much, but this kind of shows us how in Islam we are able to support certain causes that are good, whether if they're not related to Islam directly, it gets still supported. Like if racism is a cause, we're allowed to oppose racism because it's something that's wrong. Even it's an oppressive issue, right? And Sayyidina Muhammad supported this because it was also an oppressive issue. And of course, charity week and stuff like that. Like as a Muslim, you have to have that. You have to do dawah in different ways, right? One of the ways of giving dawah is being a good Muslim. It's by calling to neutral matters of goodness and truth and justice, being a spokesperson against hatred and oppression. So being a spokesperson against racism, and even supporting things that are good. So if you support charity, support blood drives, support charity weeks, tabling to strangers, to donate to Muslim communities in need, and orphans, all that. That is also a form of doing dawah. So you need to keep in mind that when you're doing things, support of certain causes, they do not have to be directly related to Islam, as long as they are just against oppression and they are good for justice and all that. So, and of course, when people go down and see you doing these things, they see you being a noble man and religious and supporting these very beautiful causes that are good for humanity. When non-Muslims see this, they think, okay, this guy's doing a lot of good things, and he's a Muslim. When you see a pattern of something, good, and then you have this thing, he's also Muslim, by the way, good. Maybe this Islam thing has something to it. Maybe this Muslim thing, maybe that is something that's right. So they start talking to you and all that. So that's why it's important to keep in mind that you need to do good in terms of giving dawah, and that can include doing acts of good. So now that we are done with those two main things that happened before the prophethood, we're going to talk about his marriage to Sayyidina Khadija. Okay? So she was a noble woman of the Quraysh, and she actually had a common ancestor with the Prophet via her father's side. So essentially, she was married twice before she married the Prophet. Does anybody know the name of her first husband? No? Okay, anyways, her first husband, she married him and had 2 kids with him. Basically what happened, and she had a son and she had a daughter. Now, after he died, passed away, she married somebody else. Then she had a 3rd child. And then of course, he died as well. So at that point, she had a big inheritance. Now, you have to know that Jahiliyyah at this time, it was very common for women, widows, to be getting a big inheritance. Usually there's siblings, there's kids, there's all that. But she was the sole successor of this will. So she got, or not will, but of this estate. So she got all of his inheritance. She got a lot of money, basically. I'm not sure if it was all or, yeah, it was all of his wealth she got. At this point, she had 2 husbands. They both died. She was still relatively young, but she had a lot of money. So what she did is, she kind of became more in the shadows, less out and about, without getting married again. And then she reinvested her money. She has all of this money. If you get a lot of money right now, what do? You reinvest it, right? Because you want to make more money, and then you can do good with that money. So she reinvested that money and started the business, right? She became a businesswoman. And this is something to keep in mind, by the way. A lot of people say that Islam is sexist, Islam is against women working and all this. We have Sayyidina Khadija, who was eventually, after I'm going to explain, was the wife of the Prophet. She was a businesswoman. But nevertheless, she had this money, she reinvested it. And what she would buy things during the season of Hajj, and then she would sell it in Syria. She would, not herself, she would hire men to go sell it for her in Syria. And that money would come back to her. It's a business. However, because she was completely reliant on the honesty and the transparency of her business partners, a lot of times she would get scammed or short-charged, or short-changed by these people. Anyways, we have the Prophet ﷺ. We mentioned before that he was a shepherd, and he would attend to people's flocks for a living, right? Khadija had a sister, and she had a herd of camels and hired the Prophet ﷺ alongside another young man to graze them outside of Mecca. So Khadija's sister hired the Prophet to do some shepherd work, basically, but it was with camels. Now, when it was time to collect the money, the Prophet ﷺ told the other man, he asked him, "Can you ask for my wages?" So he asked him to ask for his wages on his behalf because he ﷺ was too shy to ask directly. So imagine that he was too shy to ask her, like he was entitled to money because he did a job for her. He was too shy to ask her for the money he was entitled. So of course, Khadija's sister, she saw this, and she said, "I have not seen a man more bashful, noble, and honorable than him." She continued to praise him and praised him in a manner that made Khadija, like it was the first time she heard about him, but something else entered her heart at this time. She's seeing all this praise about the Prophet ﷺ, about his work and how he acts and all this. Like he just like something entered her heart at this time. So she decided to extend an offer to business partnership with him, even though he was not very entrepreneurial. She extended him an offer to work with him. And this offer, it was not like just like an average offer. She had it so that it was an even split. It was a very generous offer, right? Even split for business. So basically, she would have the goods, he would go to Syria and sell it. Now, something to note is the Prophet, before doing this, he went to go seek counsel from Abu Talib. When he did that, he very, very, very strongly encouraged him to accept the offer. So, anyways, he went on his first business trip to Syria to do his job in Khadija, and actually he came back and had a lot of multiplied profits, right? So he was very blessed in all of his actions with Islam. But his honesty and his integrity undoubtedly contributed to all of his success, of course. So everything he did was blessed, but also him being honest to all this made things successful as well. So then one day, an elderly friend of Sayyidina Khadija said to Sayyidina Muhammad, "Oh, Ya Muhammad, why don't you get married?" The Prophet ﷺ, he was not a prophet yet, he replied, he said, "And who would marry me? I'm a poor orphan of the Quraysh." Then she responded, "And what if Khadija wanted to marry you?" After a short pause, he said, "Why would she want to marry me?" And then the conversation ended there. Then later on, there was developments that continued until they did marry, but that's where the conversation ended. Of course, later on, they did get married, and there was a dowry that came, and of course, he paid the equivalent of 1.2 thousand US dollars, which at the time was 12 qiyya of silver. And her uncle, Amr ibn Asad, said, "This is a young man that cannot be refused," and he gave her away. So this is how they got married at the beginning. Of course, there's ikhtilaf on what age she was. Some people say she was 40. Some people say that she was 25 or 28. Some people say she was 40. Some people say she was 28. Nevertheless, regardless, she was married to him for 25 years. So in this marriage, we have an example from Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ. He was married to his wife 25 years. This is not like he did not marry anybody else in this time. He did not have any other wives. It was just him and Sayyidina Khadija married for 25 years. So Allah gave us an example in this marriage of one marriage where it's two people like this, monogamous relationship. Now, of course, we have other examples that Allah gave us in the Seerah. So in the Seerah, we have other examples. So we're going to get into the other ones. So does anybody know how many wives the Prophet has married in his life in total? What number? 11. We got it. So he married 11 people total. So 25 years, he only had one wife. After she passed away, there's 10 more after that, right? But so we had one example in Islam of monogamy, and then Allah gave us examples afterwards of polygamous relationships. So I had 11 wives total. Of course, not at the same time because we're not allowed to do that. But it was 11 wives total because some of them passed away and such, right? So, like we said, he married her. Let's say at the age of 25, they remained in a monogamous relationship for 25 years. After she died, he remarried and practiced polygamy for the remainder of his life. And he was married for a variety of reasons. So Allah gives examples of different ages of the wives. We have different statuses of the wives and then previous marital experience. So we have examples of a prophet marrying somebody older than him, somebody who was married before him, somebody with kids, all that. We have different examples Allah has given us in terms of marriage. So his first child, Qasim, he was born before his prophethood. So the prophet's title at the time was Abu Qasim, father of Qasim. And this is a tradition the Arabs do. Some of them so good where they name the father, whatever the son's name, they say Abu that. So my son's name is Muhammad and Abu Muhammad. No? Abu Yunus, Abu Yunus. My son's name is Yunus. Anyways, his firstborn child passed away at the age of 6 or 7. And then, of course, he had Zainab and Ruqayya and Umm Kulthum and Fatima and Abdullah and Ibrahim. And then some suggest that he had 2 more children, but this is there's difference of opinion here. Some of them say that these could just be nicknames from one of his other children. Anyways, his 4 daughters lived until they reached maturity, but then 3 of them died in his lifetime, leaving only Fatima to outlive. So basically, what I want to highlight here is the Prophet, he faced a lot of hardship in his life. One of the biggest hardships one can go through is losing their children. Now, I'll tell you, just a couple of weeks ago or so, I was in the masjid and his brother passed away. He was like just our age. He was an engineer at a big tech company, our age, 23 years old. And he passed away. And I saw his father, like the look on his father's eyes and his brother's eyes. Like, you can't, like that amount of pain, it's so deep. It's so like, it's something that requires a lot of sabr and a lot of work, right? Now, the Prophet, he had to bury 6 out of 7 children in his lifetime. 6 out of 7. So you have 7 kids, 6 of them you bury. So he had to face that 6 times. And again, there's a toll that takes on a person. But the Prophet, he has tawakkul, right? He has reliance on Allah. So of course we know that he is tested more than the rest of humanity, right? Much, much more. These are just some of the tests he had to go through in his life, right? And of course we know that hardship softens the heart. And then of course being heedless, that kind of makes it more hard, right? So in this case, we have many, many instances that made his heart more soft. So after his son Abdullah passed away, the Prophet's enemy Abu Jahl, he ran through the streets of Mecca shouting, Muhammad's progeny is cut off, Muhammad's progeny is cut off. So he's kind of taunting this, Muhammad, he lost his son. This guy was adding salt to the wound. He was adding, basically, he was saying, he's mourning the death of his son, and he's saying, basically, you don't have a son anymore. You don't have any son to continue your legacy. Of course, Allah, he replied on his behalf. He said, indeed, we have granted you abundant goodness, so pray and sacrifice to your Lord alone. Only the one who hates you is truly cut off. And indeed, the Prophet's followers, through his ummah, amassed billions. So now we have billions of people following the Prophet's message and the part of his ummah. While Abu Jahl, no one even mentions him anymore. When they mention him, it's always in a bad connotation, not in a good way, always in a negative way. So this is another example of something instead. So I have 2 more things I want to talk about, inshallah, and I'll try to wrap things up. One of the things is something that happened in his early adulthood, which is the rebuilding of the Kaaba. So the Kaaba was damaged by a fire and a flood. So it would flood every 10 or so years. In addition, there was neighboring areas of the Kaaba, and one time one of the houses caught on fire, and there was a cooking pot that caught on fire and spread to the pot of the Kaaba. So it was damaged but not completely destroyed. And then, of course, later that year, a flood happened and made it worse. Of course, the walls and things like that were damaged from the fire and all that. And the roof was completely destroyed, right? So Quraysh said, we need to rebuild this. So what happened here, this is kind of a side story, but it connects back to this one. The Christian Romans and the Zoroastrian Persians, they were at war, right? And there was a church at Yemen that was destroyed in the war. So then the Caesar, he financed the rebuilding of the church with the highest quality marble, the highest materials, the best materials. What happened is Allah made there be a more powerful storm that would result in this ship that had all these materials being shipped to Yemen. They had to stop at Jeddah. And at some point, they had forced the people at the ship to dock there, and they had to sell the materials to get some money. So they sold the materials. When Quraysh found out about it, they went straight to them. They pulled their money together. They bought the materials from the ship, and they started rebuilding the Kaaba. And they also had the help of the Roman carpenter that was on the ship to help rebuild the Kaaba. Long story short, there were different tribes that were fighting over who had to install the black rock. Because there's a black rock in the Kaaba. One tribe put one side of the Kaaba, one wall. Another tribe put another wall. And then these 2 tribes were now fighting over who gets to put the black stone. And then they had to stop construction for 5 days because they were really fighting over who gets to put the stone in the Kaaba. This is a very beautiful video, right? And at the point where it actually came to a point where like they were going to fight to the death, basically. They made a secret pledge, one of the tribes, that they would fight to the death before backing down. And they even dipped their hands in blood to sign this pledge. On the 5th day of them stopping construction, what happened is the oldest person alive in Mecca, he put a stop to this conflict and badness. He said, look, how about this? This is a very big conflict. You guys are fighting. There's no solution here. How about the next person that enters the room, we'll have him put in the black rock. And you know what he said? You know who that person was that entered the room? It's the Prophet, right? Prophet. So they gave it to him to put it on, and what he said is his solution, because of course both tribes that were against each other, they cheered on Prophet Muhammad. They didn't care what tribe he was from. They cheered that he would get to put it in because everybody loved him. Great. What ended up he said is that he placed the black stone in a garment, and he ordered every tribe to send a representative to place the black stone in the Kaaba in unison. So it had every single tribe would send a representative, and they would all put it in together. So this was the best solution to prevent conflict, to prevent issues. They all put it in the Kaaba together. So this is another part of the wisdom of the Prophet. Of course, there are lots of changes in structure and stuff. It's not directly related to the early adulthood of the Prophet, so I will not get into that right now. The final point I want to talk about is how he adopted. Do you know who he adopted? Anybody know the name of the person he adopted? Zayd ibn Haritha. Zayd ibn Haritha. Does anybody know his story, where he came from? His background? Yeah?
He's a slave that was sold.
He was a slave, exactly. So specifically what happened, he was from a Yemeni tribe. And what happened is his parents were from two different tribes. On his father's side of his family, somebody kidnapped him basically and sold him into slavery. And of course, he made his way eventually to become the Prophet's servant. What happened is he was sold, and then Khadija's nephew bought him, and then Khadija gave him to the Prophet, and he was a slave of the Prophet. Okay. Now this was happening for a while, and then Zayd's father, Haritha, was still alive. He was frantically looking for his son. He was like, his son was kidnapped. He doesn't know where he was. Was he a slave? Is he still alive? Is he he's a slave? Where is he? He doesn't know any of this stuff. Eventually, word got back to him that he was actually the slave of the Prophet. So he went to the Prophet. He asked him, Ya Muhammad, grandson of Abdul Muttalib, you are a noble man of noble lineage, and you are from a people of trustworthiness. Now he continued to praise the Prophet and say good things to him. Before he said, he asked the Prophet if he can return his son to them. The Prophet said, I will let Zayd decide. If he chooses you, I will return him without any ransom. But if he chooses me, then I can never turn away someone who has turned to me. So then, of course, the father was very happy. It's much better than he thought. It's like, okay, if he chooses me, I'm his actual father. If he chooses me, I don't have to pay anything. He's going to be free to come to me. I don't have to pay anything. This is better than what I was asking. So then he asked him. Of course, the Prophet he had a genuine love for Zayd. And but of course he didn't have to be so generous in his offer, but he still was generous in the offer. And he asked him this. Zayd, who was now in his 20s or so, because he was sold in slavery for a while ago, right? He's now in his 20s. He came to decide, and in an instant, who did he choose between his father and the Prophet? The Prophet, right? He chose the Prophet over his own father. Of course, his father was like, he was shocked, right? But of course, Zayd says, I can never choose anyone over you, for you are more than a father and an uncle combined. Now this created like this astonishing response, and it came back. It was like his father said, like, Zayd, have you lost your mind? You prefer your own father, or you prefer to remain a slave to a man who is not your kin, rather than return to your own father, to your own tribe? And Zayd responded, yes, I stick to my choice, for I have seen from this man that which prevents me from choosing anyone over him. So you have to reflect on this. Like, look at the Prophet. This person was sold as a slave to him, and he's a slave. He's doing whatever he asks. Yet he still chooses to be a slave of the Prophet over going back to his own father as a free man. Like, that just shows like the level of the Prophet. Like how good does a person have to be? How amazing does a person have to be for you to choose being a slave to him over going back to your own father as a free man? Of course, the Prophet heard his response, and he chose what he chose, right? But he still took Zayd to the Kaaba. He announced, O people of Mecca, I want you all to testify that Zayd is a free man, and I have adopted him as my son. He will inherit from me, and I will inherit from him. And he became known henceforth as Zayd ibn Muhammad. Now, of course, later in Surah Al-Ahzab, Allah revealed that you cannot, when you adopt somebody, they should have the name of the actual family, not of the person they adopted. So later on, he got renamed back to Zayd ibn Harith. But of course, this connection continued, and Zayd was married to Ayman, who was a servant of the Prophet's mother. So there's a connection already back to the Prophet again. His wife was a servant of the Prophet's mother. And then their child was born in the house of the Prophet. And then the famous Osama bin Zayd, this was the son of Zayd, right? He was so beloved to the Prophet that whenever the companions wanted to ask him something, they would ask Osama to ask for them, because it was very hard for him to refuse to say no to Osama bin Zayd. So Sayyidina Muhammad, he loved Zayd, and he loved Osama bin Zayd, and it was a level that was very, very high. Even Aisha said, she said that if he hadn't died, there's a battle that he died in. I want to make sure I have the right one. Don't misquote. I believe he died in battle of Mu'tah. It was a battle against the Romans, basically. Aisha said that if he did not die in this battle, then he would have been the next Khalifa. But eventually, he was not the next Khalifa. Nevertheless, he was the only companion in the Quran to be mentioned. Right? There are many, many companions that the Prophet had, but the only one to be mentioned is who? It's Zayd. And of course, even Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Abu Bakr, he was not even mentioned in the Quran by explicitly. He was mentioned by inference. But of course, nobody ever commanded Zayd. Of course, the Prophet ﷺ, he actually put Zayd on 10 expeditions minimum, and he was a commander in all of them. Nobody ever commanded him, regardless of age. And it showed that he had a very high status that the Prophet gave him, ﷺ, and he was very, very beloved. So this is a small kind of overview of the early adulthood of the Prophet ﷺ, and we will be going into the Meccan era next time, inshallah. That's when the things start getting very, very interesting. But now, Mahdi and Yunus and I have kind of given a background to the Prophet ﷺ's early life and the background of the time and his early adulthood and such. Jazakallah khair. Wassalamu alaikum.
Any questions?
Yes, questions.
No.
True, any questions, guys?
I might not be able to answer this fine.